Hello everyone, this is me, Ewaenruwa Nomaren, and this is my channel, It Pays to Fear God. This is where we learn about God, His beloved Son Jesus Christ, and their kingdom purpose, the three most important subjects that we can ever learn about, talk about, or discuss in the entire Holy Bible, according to John chapter 17, verse 3. The subject that I have prepared for you and myself today is captioned Satan 101, an intro to Lucifer. However, before I get into that, I once again have a tune that some of us might enjoy. Once again, the subject that I have prepared for you and myself today is captioned Satan 101, an intro to Lucifer. Many of us have wondered or pondered who Satan the devil really is. Many of us have researched the Bible, some of us scholars, some of us just interested in who our enemy, also the enemy of God, really is. And the Bible has given us many hints. For example, in Ezekiel chapter 27, Ezekiel the prophet had used the city of Tyre existing on this earth to help us understand who Lucifer was at the time. He was somebody of great value, the way we see gold, the way we see emeralds, obsidian, pearl, all those kinds of gems. That was how Satan was in heaven. He was valued. He was very important. He was somebody that everybody cheered to have in the environment. Somebody everybody celebrated when he was around. And same goes with how the city of Tyre was. It was a seaport and everything there was valued. It had supplies and it was used to build up various kingdoms. It was like how Dubai now is, or New York, or London, big cities like that, which the world would find a little more difficult to survive if those cities weren't there. So that was how the city of Tyre was then, and that was also how, even before that, Satan the devil was to God and the rest of the people. However, of course, when you have such abilities and pride is not taken care of, things can gradually go wrong. And not only was that how the city of Tyre was, but more importantly, that was how Satan the devil was. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Wilt thou yet say before him that slayeth thee, I am God? But thou shalt be a man, and no God, in the hand of him that slayeth thee. Ezekiel chapter 28 and verses 15, 17, and verse 9. And this same idea is what has ruined many empires in the past. It's about pride. You first of all succeed, you're doing just fine, but then your heart starts to get lifted up. And then, of course, you have to be abased by God, because that is what happens to people who forget God because of their extreme success. Ezekiel chapter 21, verse 26, Proverbs chapter 1, from verses 24 to 30, and Luke chapter 14, verse 11. So that was what happened to Satan the devil. And after all of that, he succeeded in what he was doing, but he got proud and then he rebelled against God because he gradually thought that his abilities and his status was too big for the low laws of God that he thought they were. And Isaiah chapter 14 from verses 12 to 15 explains this well. In fact, if you read it from verses 1 to 20, it talks about the various behaviors and thought processes that Satan the devil went through. He wanted to sit in the same seat and throne of God, in the sense that, not a physical chair, but he wanted to have the same title, status, as God himself, his own father, had. But of course, he was abased by God. He was thrown down to hell. Hell, as in the punishment, wanted him. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9. And that is generally what happens to people who behave like Satan the devil. He rebelled against God. He went his own way, came with others, Others who were just like him, thinking that, yes, I'm happy that you have finally decided to rebel. We will follow you. Just as how kings decide to do what they want, and they've got princes, they've got servants, they've got followers, citizens that all want to do the same thing, be proud and succeed along with them in their big thrones and big chairs. But it's important that we understand being like Satan the devil is never good. You should never rebel against God's principles, because people who do that will indeed be abased. Proverbs chapter 1 from verses 24 to 30, Ezekiel chapter 21 verse 26, and Luke chapter 14 verse 11. Now, in order to understand Satan the devil just a little better, it's always good to look at examples of people, especially in the Bible, who behaved a lot like Satan the devil himself. For example, Esau resembles Satan the devil because of his extreme foolishness and his inability to understand what God had in store for him, especially the blessings, if he would stay with God and always keep his commandments. Esau was one of the sons of Rebekah in Genesis chapter 25 from verses 21 to 34. His brother was Jacob. And even though it was already prophesied that the elder would serve the younger, Esau still one day decided, okay, because I'm hungry, I'm going to sell my birthright. And St. Paul had actually reflected on this and used this to help us understand how we should never behave like Satan the devil when he said, lest any man be a fornicator, or anybody like that, or Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. For ye know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessings, he was rejected. For he had no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. Hebrews chapter 12 and verses 16 and 17. You can't go back on something that you already sold. And that was what Esau eventually had to suffer. And then later, he wanted to kill Jacob. He was envious, he was angry because he'd already made a stupid decision, but he still wanted to take a shortcut around that dumb decision he already made. And he wanted to kill Jacob. The family even had to be split, Jacob and his people. They had to be split just so that if one part gets killed, the other wouldn't also be killed. So that was what had to happen because Esau wanted to kill Jacob after that dumb decision that he made. And this is no different from what Satan the devil had wanted to do to Jesus, because the whole relationship between Esau and Jacob and how different they were was the same as how Jesus Christ and Satan the devil were also very different. During the Passion of Jesus Christ, one of the most famous movies that has ever been filmed, based on the Bible story itself, in Matthew chapters 26 and 27, John chapters 18 and 19, whichever book you want to read it in, it was said that Satan the devil wanted to kill Jesus because, of course, he wanted to jeopardize and ruin God's plan. And he knew killing Jesus, tempting him, doing those kinds of things would help in that process because Jesus Christ was a major, big part of it. So in order for him to do that, he had to kill Jesus Christ using some of his gang members, the Pharisees, who were directly having conversations with Satan the devil in the sense that they had nothing to do with God. They were literally working for Satan the devil, whether they known about it or not. John chapter 8 verse 44 explains this very well. And that was why Jesus Christ ended up being killed. And if Satan the devil had succeeded in actually preventing the whole resurrection idea and all that from happening, then God's plan would be ruined because humans would not have a life to replace what was lost by Adam and Eve. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. However, this statement of Jesus Christ clearly goes against what Satan the devil wanted to happen. I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and have the keys of hell and death. Revelation chapter 1, verse 18. He defeated the devil. He defeated death. 1 John chapter 3, verse 8, and Hebrews chapter 2, in verses 14 and 15. He defeated Satan the devil by defeating death, because Satan the devil was all about death and rebelling. He defeated that by going against what Satan the devil wanted, by doing what God himself, his own Father, had been wanting to please him the whole time. So it's important we understand what Esau had done, how he completely forgot about the blessings and decided to go for one simple meal, and how Satan the devil himself also wanted to completely forgo the blessings that God had for him because of his own ideas and was foolish and of course failed because God's plans will never be turned around to go the wrong way. Isaiah chapter 58 from verses 8 to 11 and many other places all over the Bible. It is very important we keep this in mind because it is one really good example of somebody who behaved like Satan the devil. And another example, very interesting example that helps us to understand who Satan the devil is a little more, is the example of Abiram, Dathan, and Korah in Numbers chapter 16 from verses 1 to 32. Satan the devil insinuated himself into these three men. And as a result, they rebelled against Moses, just as how Satan rebelled against God. These three men were people who thought that Moses' rule was based on a wrong sense. It was like you are trying to bring too much power onto yourself. You don't have better leadership qualities. You don't have a PhD in leadership. So why should you ever feel that you can suddenly take over everybody and lead the hundreds of thousands of people in the wilderness when we ourselves are also good? Because, Moses was obviously God's chosen leader, Exodus chapter 3, from verses 1 to 14. So you'd expect that he would call himself the leader and he would lead the people. But these three men, completely led by Satan the devil himself, did not understand this. And as a result, we're saying we should be the leaders. And they caused a rebellion. They caused a riot. Many people decided to join because, of course, many people agreed with what these three men were saying. And Moses fell on his face and prayed to God for this to be rescued. And then, of course, an earthquake came about, swallowed those three men up, and the others who, of course, flocked with him. And then as a result, everything ended right there. Satan the devil has always been somebody of rebellion. Things just got worse and worse. As in Genesis chapter 3, from verses 1 to 6, he rebelled against God by, of course, making Eve convince Adam to eat the apple. That was jeopardizing God's plan, like how those three men had jeopardized the plan that God had, led by Moses. How in Job's time persecuted him, in Jesus' time tempted him. He was just continuously insinuating himself into other people, like Judas Iscariot. John chapter 6 verse 70, selling the identity and status of Jesus Christ so that the Pharisees could fight him and kill him. The devil has always been doing that, selling him or insinuating himself into others so that those people can be like him, because he thinks that that kind of status that he has is really good, being the most wicked person in this world. And the Bible has also told us some of the tools that Satan the devil uses to rule this world. And some of those things are ignorance, his craftiness, and of course his influence in this world. Let's start off with the fact that he loves it when other people are ignorant, because that allows him to insinuate himself with others without him even knowing. And St. Paul had occasion to touch on this matter when he said, "But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them that believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them." 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verses 3 and 4. Satan the devil has blinded the minds of people who have already cast out God, so that they can be deluded and do the exact will that he wants them to do. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 from verses 1 to 12. The Pharisees are a great example of this. Many of them were thinking that they were really worshiping God, but in reality, they were just being controlled freely by Satan the devil. And St. Paul alluded to this by stating, "Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish their own personal righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God." Romans chapter 10 from verses 1 to 3. And the Pharisees were a living example of this. And Jesus Christ knew this. They were completely blind before God. John chapter 9 from verses 39 to 41. That 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 4 fulfilled on those Pharisees. They were blindly being controlled by Satan the devil. And in these last days, many people are in this condition too. Satan the devil has transformed himself into an angel of light and his people into ministers of righteousness. 2 Corinthians chapter 11 from verses 13 to 15. Everything that they're doing, everything that they introduce into this world seems so righteous and good, whether it be fornication, adultery, unlimited freedom, or anything like that. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, despisers of those that are good, without natural affection, unthankful, unholy, and many others, These things are not only localized, but they are institutionalized to the extent that all kinds of governments and rulers of this world are supporting those things. And the devil himself is just sitting on top of all of those things. And the governments and institutions and churches themselves don't even notice. It's very important we understand how all of this is happening, how delusion works, as it is the tool to everything that is happening, the inability to have controlled peace in this world. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 from verses 1 to 12. And then another tool that Satan the devil uses to rule this world is influence. And the Bible has talked a lot about this. For example, King Solomon had told us, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will." Proverbs chapter 21 verse 1. Now this isn't just God's power, it's also in the power of all the other spirits, including Satan the devil. And that story of the Pharisees fits this too. He influenced them. That was why Jesus Christ had said that ye are of your father because you do the works of him. John chapter 8 verse 44. And what were those works? Hypocrisy, all kinds of nonsense that they were doing. In fact, if you read their whole history, in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you see how they behaved. They were complete hypocrites. They misused God's institutions, cultures, and traditions, and made them worthless to the extent that God had to destroy them and his own cultures and traditions because they were brought down to nothing, all because of Satan's influence and power. He also influenced some others, like Judas Iscariot, as I talked about earlier, John chapter 6, verse 70. At a time, he even influenced David in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1. Entered him, insinuated himself in him. And that was why David went to go count the people, as if God asked him to do that. He later went to go ask God for forgiveness, but that is what the devil does. The spirits, that is how they react. That is how they live their lives. They're not physical, so they give you ideas and thoughts. And that is why many apostles like James have told us to resist the devil and he will flee from us. James chapter 4 verse 7, and the other apostles as well. And he is also crafty. Now, why do I say Satan the devil is a very crafty and clever person? We can look at the parable Jesus Christ gave us in Matthew chapter 13 from verses 24 to 30 of the wheat and tares. There were farmers that were planting their normal wheat, but then an enemy came when they were not watching, maybe in the night, and decided to plant tares. Now, it was not in the open field where nobody was. No, it was within their own field. Now, that's how clever he was, that he decided to plant tares. And then when the farmers saw it, they were like, oh, should we just go and take these out? But then the chief guy said, no, let's not do that because we might uproot our own if we do that. We'll wait until the harvest time and then throw something in there so that by the time everything is done, we'll see which one is fake and which one is real. And that is directly what Jesus Christ meant. When he set up the church, that whole idea, people gathering together and so on and so forth, he set it up clean. It was perfect. However, Satan the devil, being the person he was, he doesn't go set up his own thing. No, he goes with the own thing that you have and he sets up his own thing there. And that was why many people started teaching different things and everything got so confusing. And then some people would just be like, okay, maybe we should just close down this idea. But then Jesus Christ said, no. I'm going to wait till the last days, and then once that happens, when I'm king in office, then we're going to test things with various things we're going to pump in this world. And do keep in mind, we're living in that own period. And then the ones who will really stay up, not the ones that will be fake and obviously will fall, the ones that will stay are the ones we're going to collect and bless. Zechariah chapter 13 in verses 8 and 9, it talks about two parts being cut off, but the third being saved, and the third being kept, because tests show that they're really positive, they are really worshiping God the way he wants to be worshipped, and therefore, that is how righteous ones will be really seen compared to the wicked. So the parable of the wheat and tares really does explain Satan's craftiness. But no matter how crafty Satan the devil can ever get, whether it is sowing seeds or whatever in what Jesus Christ or God is doing, it will never actually defeat what God wants to do, because though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not go unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. Proverbs chapter 11 in verses 19 and 21, but specifically verse 21, craftiness will never pay, no matter how crafty we think we really are. Now, in these last days, the Bible has told us that Satan the devil is going to be destroyed. Not necessarily him at that time, but all of his institutions. And he himself is going to help in that process. His institutions have to do with unlimited freedom, the ability to do whatever you want, going against God's principles. And if we read the thousands of years of human history, we see how his institutions have been sold, and of course, exactly what God wants to do. However, God has finally gotten fed up with Satan the devil and all of his institutions, and they're going to be crushed. Their webs will not become garments, neither shall they cover themselves with their works, because their works are works of iniquity, and their act of violence is going to be destroyed. Everything. Isaiah chapter 59 verse 6. And no matter what anybody thinks, every wall that is going to be existing in this world, all the institutions, no matter how crafted they are, every wall shall fall at the presence of God, and the mountains shall be thrown down, not physically but spiritually. Ezekiel chapter 38 and verses 19 and 20. Now that God has put his king in office, Psalms chapter 21 from verses 1 to 3. Satan the devil can do absolutely nothing, because the battle of the great day of God Almighty has brought him to nothing, according to Revelation chapter 12 from verses 1 to 12. And not only that, God isn't going to stop there. Satan the devil has already been defeated, because spirits don't take a duration of time to do things. It happens once and that's the end. But it's playing out slowly in this world. There was the World War I and World War II, where Satan the devil actually started being defeated, including his institutions. And then, now things are really starting to happen, because that was just the beginning of sorrows. Matthew chapter 24 from verses 6 to 8. However, now his institutions are really starting to die. They're being weakened. It's like the volume of a radio. It's being cranked. When it reaches the highest volume, everything will be obvious, as Jesus Christ had stated. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew chapter 24, verse 27. All of this is going to start out slow, as it already has. Things are picking up now, because it's going to hasten in our time. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 22. Usually when it's a day, it starts off at dawn, it becomes lighter, and then when it's like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, depending on where we live in the world, the sun is the brightest. Everything is hot. That is also how things are going to become in this world. It's going to be at the midst of the week that things are going to start becoming crazy, where things are going to start happening. Everything is at its highest point. The climax, if we know books, that's how it works. The climax, before everything starts to descend, before everything has already happened, and God concludes this time that we call the last days. I hope it is clear now who Satan the devil is and what his plans really are. Once again, Satan the devil is somebody who many of us wonder about. We look at him, we're just wondering, how does he really work? Well, when we look at the Bible and we study it in detail, we come to have an understanding. And Jesus Christ warned us, based on Satan the devil's person, that we should always make sure we know when he's coming. It is impossible but that offenses come, but woe unto him through whom they come. Matthew chapter 18 verse 7 and Luke chapter 17 verse 1. The last days that we are in is not owned by Satan the devil, but Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ also told us that because of what he's going to be doing, taking on Satan the devil's system of things, we have to know when he's coming. The thief in the night, Revelation chapter 16 verse 15, so that we are not caught along the snares and traps that he has set for Satan the devil and his institutions. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness, and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come upon all them that dwell upon the face of the earth. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Luke chapter 21, from verses 34 to 36. Jesus Christ gave us this warning to help us understand when he's coming and not be taken away by what he's doing. Therefore, we must study the Bible, understand how Satan the devil works, and what's going to be happening to him in these last days, so that we are not found in the same kind of judgment, the same kind of punishments that is going to be brought on that man Lucifer, who has decided to rebel against God Almighty himself. And I choose to end my talk on the subject, Satan 101, an intro to Lucifer. To conclude this episode, I once again have a tune that some of us might enjoy. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something most importantly. Please try to subscribe and share this video because Satan the devil is a very important and interesting topic among many Christians in this world. But we have to understand who he is so that we are not caught in his traps and his punishments. Thank you for listening.